Good morning, everyone. I'll grab your attention. Hey, thanks so much for coming out so early. I know early mornings is not an uncommon thing for you guys, so thanks for taking a couple of hours out of your day to be with us here this morning. My name's Lish Fayer. I'm your MC for this morning, and over the course of the next few months, we've been hosting a series of WorkSafe ACT industry breakfasts. So today's construction with a focus on it pays to be safe. Now, before we kick it off with three great speakers and questions, please, as you're listening to the speakers today, any questions, we'll have a panel discussion after, so just keep note of those. But before we start, I'd like to welcome the fabulous Auntie Violet to the stage to give us our welcome to country. Look, I know, and as I saw her come up the stairs, she said, God, is there a coffee up there, Lish? I said, bottomless. So, Auntie Violet, lovely to see you.
Thank you. Once again, it's a pleasure. Can't you have morning teas? Goodness. 5:30 wake-ups, but thank God for the Olympics. But it's my pleasure once again, and the topics when I come along each event, even though it's early, it's very interesting, and it's an educational thing, but particularly for community people like me. So I'm told that it's about construction and safety in construction, and it is. I've lost a nephew through he was an electrician, only 20, and was working on a site down in Sydney, and he got electrocuted and passed away, which is very sad because he had a young family as well. So, and I know the importance of being safe on construction sites, because we got to get it right, because these men or women that work on construction site have families. There are young people, so if we don't get it right on the construction and keep them safe and let them go on to their families each night, so I'm looking forward to hearing the topic today. So it is my pleasure to welcome you to the land of the Ngunnawal people. This is my mother's country. My mother is a Ngunnawal woman, and my father is a Wiradjuri man, but I follow my matriarch's bloodline. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Violet Sheridan. I'm a senior Ngunnawal elder and a matriarch now, because my matriarch has passed on, so I step into her shoes. So it is my pleasure once again to welcome you. But before I go into my welcome, I'd like to acknowledge Jacqui, Agius, Work and Health Safety Commissioner, Deputy Amanda Gray, and I see the beautiful Rebecca Vanarossi there, and Mick Gentleman, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the land of the Ngunnawal people. I'd like to pay my respects to my elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any First Nations people here this morning. But I'd also like to acknowledge the non-Indigenous people in the room, and listen up, because I only say this in Canberra, in keeping the general spirit of friendship and reconciliation. It gives me great pleasure once again to welcome you to the land of the Ngunnawal people. And on behalf of my family and the other Ngunnawal families, I say welcome. And you'll say, I've been living here for years, but it's always good, because I've been told growing up, you welcome somebody to country, and the reason for that is to protect your spirit while you are on our land. And my heart is still breaking from last year. That is why I always say, so listen up, is because I really thought that the referendum would get up last year. I worked so hard, and other community people in the community, along with my grandson, Noah. And on that Saturday night, it took 5 minutes to give us the outcome of the referendum, which the no vote got up. I say to people, I seen my grandson, he's 21-year-old now, I seen him cry when he was born in the labour ward. I seen him cry when he was a toddler, but I seen my grandson cry that Saturday night, a 21-year-old. Our hearts were broken. The reason why the voice was for us to fix us up, because the only one that's going to close this gap is us community member. But I'm going to get off the stage now, and I wish you all a happy day, because I'm going to go home and have a nanny nap after this. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Auntie Violet. And I think Auntie Violet's experience of losing someone, I think that's why we're here. You just want to go home safe. We want our employees to go home safe. You want to go home safe. And while workplace health and safety is not a fun topic, there's a great breakfast. And it's an important topic. And so thank you all for coming out today. 3 wonderful speakers. But before we get started, there is a few things just to be aware of today. We are recording the event for future purposes, so people can access it after. If you have a problem with that, please come and see us, and we'll make sure you're excluded from any recording. And it also brings up some really difficult topics and graphic occurrences. So if that raises any issues for you, again, please feel free to get up, leave the room, and find your own space. Mental health, a very big part of workplace health and safety as well. Now, breakfast, it's going to be arriving soon, and don't be ashamed to eat loudly, steal the person's next to you, because if there are a few spare seats, nothing we hate more WorkSafe ACT hates more is the fact of wasting food as well. So please eat the person's next to you, and keep going up and refilling your cup of coffee or tea. It's the world's smallest cup here at the beautiful Hotel Realm. So just keep going and listening and enjoying and engaging with this morning's really important topic. Now, we have got 3 wonderful speakers, along with a host of all of you who've worked in the industry for a short period of time, a long period of time, for small businesses, for big businesses, in unions, in various aspects of construction, on the tools. And today we're going to hear from Jacqui Agius, who is the Workplace Health and Safety Commissioner here in the ACT. She's also the Labour Hire Commissioner. We'll hear from Jacqui first, then Joanne Farrell, and Helen Lingard, who is bringing the data to today and research. So please give a warm welcome this morning to kick off our host and Workplace Safety Commissioner, Jacqui Agius. Thanks, Jacqui.
Good morning. I must say the Matildas are adding to my stress levels at the moment, so I'll try to be really calm. We've had 1 loss so far, a win yesterday, and who knows what's going to happen this week, but I have to say I love those girls. They're amazing. Thank you, Auntie Violet, for your welcome to country, and thank you, Lish, who arrives at every breakfast pumped and full of endless energy. So much energy that at this time of the morning it doesn't bide very well with me. But anyway, I will try to remain awake. We have two other wonderful panellists this morning, Helen and Jo. Really appreciate you being here. I'd like to recognise Minister Gentleman, Minister Vassarotti, members of the Legislative Assembly, Mr Ed Cox and Mr Mark Parton, Gillian Geraghty, who's here from Major Projects, distinguished guests, and everyone in the room. Thank you so much for being here this morning and joining WorkSafe ACT to discuss safety in construction. One other thank you, because whilst sometimes we like to think that these events happen in a vacuum, behind these events is some really hard work. So Frank, Georgia and the team at WorkSafe, you're inspiring me every day. I'm so proud to work in an organisation with such committed and wonderful people. And if we can just take this opportunity just to give a bit of a round of applause for everyone behind making today's event possible. So we have 7 of these breakfasts this year, and Frank started with us in March, and I think in April, I said to Frank, look, we really need to get these industry breakfasts up and going. I've been asking for them for a couple of years, and a few weeks later, Frank said our first one's in May. So that's how amazing people in WorkSafe are, and just so committed to keeping workers safe. As I flick through my slides this morning, you'll see photographs taken by WorkSafe inspectors as they go about their inspections. These incidents in the photographs are not unusual for us. We see them on a weekly basis, and I'm sure some of you in this room are going to be really shocked at some of those photos as they come up. At a time when the construction industry is under pressure with high interest rates, cost pressures, difficulties ensuring supply of materials and labour shortages, we cannot afford to cut costs on safety. Safety is not an expense. It is an investment in your business's future. We must ensure we keep construction workers safe so they go home safe and healthy to their loved ones and are able to keep working. Oh, I think I've gone, there we go, someone's we're changing the slides together. Okay, cool. I'll change the slides because I've made some changes. It pays to be safe in the construction industry. Safety makes good financial sense, but not just for the construction industry. Safety makes good financial sense in all workplaces and for all workers. During the financial year 23 to 24, WorkSafe ACT inspectors conducted 969 workplace visits in the construction industry. 55% of these visits were reactive and 45% of the visits were proactive. Reactive visits are visits in relation to a notifiable incident or a complaint by a worker or a member of our community. 233 of our proactive visits were in response to notifiable incidents. Most of those incidents were for a dangerous event. WorkSafe issued 1,183 notices in the construction industry. 142 of these notices were infringement notices, which amounted to $578,984. Along with the cost of an infringement notice, or indeed any notice, is the loss of productivity in the time it takes to fix the safety breach. In the ACT, there have been over 500 accepted compensation claims in the construction industry, with falls and moving objects the most common cause for these claims. Over 500 workers in the construction industry off work on workers' compensation for a period of time during 23 and 24. Most, but not all, of these injuries were preventable. I say most, as we all know that workers' compensation is a no-fault system. Falls from heights and slips and trips are preventable. By preventing these injuries before they occur, we could have lessened the pressure of labour shortages in the construction industry. It's important to note that safety policies are fundamental in protecting the health and safety of our workers. A safe system of work based on proactive measures is fundamental to identifying and mitigating potential hazards before they become incidents. The proactive approach is the cornerstone to effective WHS management. The more proactive we are in managing safety, the less reactive we will need to be. Companies with a strong safety approach attract and retain more workers. Let's have a look at some of the cost-saving benefits. When When financial pressures are mounting up, investing in safety may seem counterintuitive, but long-term savings are considerable. Preventing health and safety incidents will reduce medical expenses, legal fees and compensation costs. It will also maintain productivity as there is less downtime. It will encourage experienced workers to stay working on your sites, and it will help keep your projects on time. But of course, financial pressures are not the only cost of not doing safety properly. The human cost of not doing safety properly for the injured workers, their loved ones, friends and their families, our community, is devastating. Some of these workers never return to work. I've also spoken to PCBUs who have had workers seriously injured on their sites. And one of the things that I hear from them all the time is, "I never thought this would happen to me." It's one of the things that keeps me awake at night, and I'm sure the other PCBUs in the room, is the thought of ensuring that all of my team are safe in their workplace, that they go home safe and that they're able to in turn come back to work and keep Canberrans safe. We can start by creating a safe environment, by embracing new technologies and methods. This can also assist with efficiency. Who can imagine building a home without a power tool? It used to happen, but we've embraced technology and it's proved to be efficient. We get a better quality build and we have more safe workplaces. Technology is a fantastic thing to consider for investing in for your business. Investing in safety translates to higher retention rates, which will reduce costs and downtime associated with recruiting and training new staff. WorkSafe inspectors love nothing more than walking on a safe site where they do not need to issue notices, and they come back to the office and talk about it. It's the talk of our office. The one thing that we talk about is how wonderful it was to go to a particular site and see all of the safety measures. It inspires us to continue doing the work that we do. Lastly, I want to say, we've got this, Canberra. We've got safety. Safety is not rocket science. In fact, some health and safety measures do not cost anything at all. Think about fatigue, for instance. A tired crane driver who has been working back-to-back 14-hour shifts is a catastrophic risk. But by ensuring rostering takes into consideration fatigue, rest and workload, someone's life could be saved. You can check out our WorkSafe website for any tips. Sign up to our subscription list, please. Follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook, and come to our National Safe Work Month events. Keep safety and health at the forefront of everything you do, at the forefront of every decision you make. With a safety-first approach and a commitment to continuous improvement, we will get this right. Safety can never be set and forget. We've got this. Together, we can get safety right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqui. I'm at the ABC, and I must admit, looking out into the room to see all these people with such incredibly practical skills to build everything that we need to build, to fix everything we need to fix. And on the corner of Northbourne Avenue and Wakefield Avenue, where the ABC is, we're the only office with people in there whose probably main risk is defamation. I think that's the main workplace risk, and also bad backs for sitting for too long. But on every other corner, there's construction happening, and I think that's what we see, and that's why Jacqui highlights that the workforce shortage, the need to attract more people to the industry, to keep you health and safety, to keep workers working longer, to feel safe at work. I think safety can't be ignored, and the community has this expectation that we will be safe at work. And as the media organisation, us reporting on unsafe work practices is not our favourite thing to do, and certainly probably from a workplace safety perspective, it probably highlights how important it is. So next I want to introduce our next guest. I've just sent her a text actually saying Farrell or Farrell, one syllable or two. She hasn't replied. So our ACT Australian of the Year, Jo Farrell. I should know this. This is an important part of my job. But ACT Australia of the Year, founder of Build Like a Girl. She is a champion for females in construction, but a champion for construction. She is the general manager of Kane Constructions, part of the multi-million-dollar Kane Group. She has pushed for gender balance. She's pushed for safe workplaces, and she's just a champion of the industry. Please welcome Jo.
This is not the first time we've met. There's no excuse. Yeah, you had one job, Leash, one job. Thanks so much for having me. You might be a little bit sick of seeing my face around the traps. I was recently, in the past 12 months, been a bit of a wild ride with various recognition and awards for the work that I've been doing in construction, and that work has been going on for about 28 years now, which is a long time to be in an industry which was incredibly unwelcoming and unsafe for me back in 1996. So that's just starting to show my age. I don't know if I'm a champion for construction or particularly the shining light as much as people think. I am simply just a person out there who is trying to be better and do better, and that's based on a lot of lived experience that I've had in those past 28 years of working in an industry that 50% of the time I absolutely love and the other 50% of the time I absolutely hate and sometimes wonder why I turn up every day. I'd love to say that in the past 28 years that we've made massive inroads and changes, and certainly from maybe a technology standpoint, like Jacqui pointed out, absolutely, there's been some massive inroads in that. But have we changed? Have people changed? Controversially, or maybe as you would know, I would say no, we haven't. And I guess I can stand here and hand on heart say that as a woman in construction for the past 28 years, because the stories that I hear from many, many women from all different backgrounds, from all different ages, but particularly young women who are starting out, are telling me the stories of things that are happening to them out on construction sites that happened to me on the first day and in the first year that I started working construction. And I sort of get up every morning and somehow wonder and kind of wrestle with my conscience about, am I doing the right thing by encouraging women to actually work in the construction industry if these things are still happening 3 decades in? Things like young girls who are knocking on doors for apprenticeships and get told, we don't want women on our work sites. We don't know how to deal with you. We think you might be a distraction. We don't think that you're able to do the job. That's in 2024. We're saying this to young women who we're in one hand saying that we've got a skills shortage and that we need more people in construction. 51% of the population are standing there waving their hands saying, give me a go. And there are people out there who are saying, we don't want you on our building sites. That was said to me by upwards of 150 companies in 1996 when I left school and started applying for work. And it's still happening now. If in the event these young girls do get a go, and you do give them a chance, and you do let them on your construction site, and you do give them somewhat of a welcome, there are other people in our industry who don't make them feel safe, who don't care about what it's like for them to come in as a person who's a minority, who might be the only female on that site. It's an incredibly lonely place. It's an incredibly lonely existence when you're still trying to learn and you're still trying to advocate for yourself as well as prove yourself in the job, and people make you feel unsafe. At the end of November last year, and it was a month after I was given the Australian of the Year award for ACT, to acknowledge work that I had done for women in the construction industry. 1 month later, in the space of 1 week, I had 4 young women ring me, all of them hysterically crying, all of them absolutely distraught, and every single one of them not knowing who could they speak to about things that happened on site. One young girl was sexually assaulted on a building site here in Canberra by a very well-known builder. And she rang me and said, I don't know what to do and this has just happened. We ended up at a police station on a Wednesday evening at 11 o'clock at night making a statement. She didn't want to tell her parents, she didn't want to tell her friends, she didn't know how to navigate that landscape that she had now been placed in. This young lady was standing on a ladder doing her job at the time when she was assaulted by a man that came up to her. And the reason and the excuse I was given by the site manager on that site was, well, she'd been smiling at him in the lunchroom that day, and so he thought she was flirting and he thought that that was welcome behaviour. Can you just imagine for a moment being up on a ladder, doing your job, and someone comes up to you and physically assaults you in that way? This is happening in our industry. I think WorkSafe released statistics, was it last month, and in June, there were 70 sexual harassment incidences, not necessarily just in construction, sexual assaults, not just in construction, but I would say we're probably overrepresented in that space. And so I don't want anyone to think that in 28 years we've made all of these fantastic inroads into this space. There is something wrong with our culture. There is something wrong with how we view and value women in our industry. And you don't get to have it both ways. You don't get to whinge and complain that you can't find people to fill the positions in your company. We can't whinge and complain saying there's all this work out there that we need to fulfill if this is how we're going to treat 51% of the population who want to come and just do their job. So we need to have the conversation, we need to have the reckoning, and we need to start turning the lens inward, particularly when we're leaders and business managers who come to these events and sit here and want to pat ourselves on the back about how wonderful we're doing. We're not. That's the reality of it. And I'm not here to make you feel comfortable. I'm not here to tell you that you're doing a fantastic job. I'm here to make you uncomfortable because I've been uncomfortable for 28 years of my working life. Now you're going to come and join me on that journey, and together we're going to make it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. And to learn how to make it better, Jo will be up on the panel after. Please get your questions ready. Helen Lingard is our next guest. So from the Workplace Safety Commissioner to Jo's lived experience to now the research. 25 years Helen has been researching. She is a doctor. She started as a doctor in construction, but a doctor of safety in construction, and she's been looking at ways that we can improve in safety in the workplace in the construction industry. She's got all the data. Please welcome Helen, Dr. Helen, to the stage.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me today, Jacqueline, and thank you, distinguished guests. So today I want to talk a little bit about, how do I make this progress? That one. I want to talk a little bit about work design considerations in the construction industry. And we've talked a little bit about technology, we've talked a little bit about culture, and we've talked a little bit about some of the industry challenges that are currently being faced. And what I'd like to suggest is that potentially considering the design of work itself in the construction industry is one way in which we can address some of the challenges experienced by the industry and potentially recruit and retain people, recruit more women, have a more diverse workforce in gender sense, but also retain our older workers as well. So we know that there's a severe labour shortage in the Australian construction industry currently, and that's the topic of the industry. Everywhere I go, people are talking about how hard it is to find workers to actually deliver the pipeline of projects that's in, on the books. We also know it's the worst performing industry in terms of gender diversity of all Australian industries. Joe's already mentioned some of the challenges that women face when they actually join the industry, and we have to ask serious questions about, is it safe and healthy for them to do so, even if we can successfully recruit them. But we know we've also got an ageing workforce. The percentage of Australians aged 65 or over was 16% in 2020, and by 2026 it's estimated to be between 21 and 23% of the total population. Now, this is a real challenge, and it's a particular challenge because construction work is physically demanding. Construction workers are susceptible to work-related injury, and particularly musculoskeletal disorders, which make up a large percentage of the workers' compensation claims we see in the construction industry. We also know, and this is research that my team have done at RMIT, actually in the Australian sector industry, that work-related musculoskeletal disorders and the experience of work-related bodily pain is experienced quite young in construction workers' lives. It starts in their 20s and it gets progressively worse. But it's also related statistically significantly to high levels of depression and anxiety, because people are concerned about how they're going to earn a living in their future, and it impacts their, the ability to be socially integrated, participate in work, and so on. And feeling bodily pain is linked to depression and anxiety. And we concern ourselves with mental health, but we don't always think about, well, what are we doing to people in the industry that contributes to the poor mental health that we have? And if that's not enough to persuade people, European research shows that 2/3 of construction workers actually retire early due to ill health or work disability. So we've got a skills shortage, we've got low levels of diversity, we've got an ageing workforce. And the question is, why aren't we looking at job design to try and address some of these things? Because there are real opportunities there. So the industry it's traditionally an industry where people work very long hours, and this is work we did many years ago, I think 2004 or something. We looked at work hours, and we found that people working on site in direct construction activity work an average of 63 hours a week each, and even people in company offices are 49. Now, the red line on this diagram is 39 hours a week. There was some wonderful work done by the Australian National University that looked at a large data set in Australia, and they found that 39 hours was the tipping point, that work is good for your mental health to a point, but beyond 39 hours, that's where your mental health starts to deteriorate. And that figure was for all ages and genders, all ages and genders. So in fact, what we see there is a gendered effect as well. That tipping point for women was actually lower substantially than it was for men. It was 34 hours a week, but men could work up to 37. Now, what was really interesting about that difference is it's wholly explained by the amount of domestic and caring work that women do. So what we're seeing here is that the long hours culture of the industry is bad for everybody if people are working these long hours, and bad for everybody's mental health and well-being, but it's particularly bad for women in the industry. This is another piece of work that we did recently with a group of trainees in the New South Wales construction industry. So the New South Wales government initiated a program where they wanted to attract school leavers who were unsure about what they wanted to do, didn't want to go to university, and they would attract them into a traineeship program. And this traineeship program involved doing some vocational education as well as doing job rotations with contractors, consultants, and client organisations. So these are young workers, school leavers, and we were able to survey them as they went through this traineeship program. So this is the data after the first rotation, so after they've been out in industry for 8 months doing this traineeship program. And you can see here that the orange line represents, the blue line represents the things that were important to them. We asked them, what's important to you in choosing a career? The blue line shows the things that were important to them. And if you look at that bottom sort of left-hand kind of quadrant, you see things like hours that don't interfere with non-work roles, control over my work time, gender diversity and fair treatment, a job that can be, and then up at the top right, colleagues I can get on with, a pleasant working environment. The orange line is their perceptions after 8 months in the industry of whether those things are going to be available to them. And you can see that the perceptions of whether those things are available is significantly smaller than the perceptions of what's important to them. So that gap between what young workers want and what they think the construction industry has to offer them is actually significant in some areas. And more importantly, that gap also was predictive of their stated intentions about whether they would stay in the industry on completion of the traineeship. So we're seeing young workers potentially, deciding how they want to pursue their careers and making choices based on what they think is not going to be a good option if they work in construction. And the things that are important to them are the things around, being able to have a job that allows them some time, some flexibility, and gender diversity and fair treatment. Again, the cultural issues that Jo was talking about. We've also talked a little bit about technology, and I would like to suggest that there are some things that the industry isn't doing well, which is adopting technologies that make work less dangerous for people. This is a piece of work that we did in 2017 in the Victorian construction industry, where we used a whole body system of wearable sensors to actually measure the impacts of doing certain jobs on people's bodies. And we looked at jackhammering, and in this case it was the breaking down of concrete piles using jackhammers. We looked at steel fixing, we looked at shotcreting, we looked at a few other things as well. And what we found was that these tasks were really physically demanding and very, very potentially damaging for people. We've got people breaking down concrete piles using jackhammers in this example, taking them 5 hours to break down one concrete pile, exposed to high levels of force on their bodies, hand-arm vibration, noise, dust, a whole range of hazards that will impact their health. And there are alternative technologies available that actually eliminate the need to use jackhammers for this particular process. Now, I know some of those alternative technologies are starting to be used, but again, they're not used perhaps as often enough, and still the industry is adhering to some of these, quite outdated ways of working that are really so harmful and are likely to discourage people from wanting to do those jobs, particularly when they know they're likely to suffer serious bodily harm as a result. Shotcreting is another example. We've got the manual kind of way of shotcreting, lugging a hose around in this environment here on the left. When we actually measured what was happening to this person's body doing this work, it was high levels of excessive back muscle activation down the right side of his body. You can see he's lugging it over his right shoulder. And there are alternative mechanized methods available. And interestingly enough, one of my sons just started working on construction. He came home the other day from work and said, "They were shotcreting on site today, Mum. Do you know what that is?" And I said, "Yes, I know what shotcreting is." And I said, "How were they doing it?" And he said, "Oh, well, they had this big hose and he was carrying it around." And I thought, well, we did this work in 2017, but clearly, these ways of shotcreting haven't changed on large engineering construction projects. And then, ergonomically designed tools. Again, we know that a lot of tools that are used have been used for forever, but there are tools now available that actually reduce the risk of back injuries, reduce the risk of wrist injuries. We know steel fixing, for example, very, very, very prevalent risk injuries. There's a lot of wrist rotation, extension and flexion, a lot of back bending. And we know that steel fixers are very prone to both back and wrist injuries. And there are tools available now that potentially reduce or eliminate the need to rotate the wrist constantly and reduce the need to bend your back. Again, are these tools that can be used more widely? Would they help address some of the issues that we're talking about when we do have such a serious labour shortage and we are harming people to such a point that sometimes they can no longer work? So my question is, are we missing out on ways to make construction safer, healthier and more productive, and also to better attract a diverse workforce and retain the skilled workers that we have for longer as they age? Thank you.
Thank you. And while I introduced Helen as a doctor, she is also the RMIT Distinguished Professor, so I underrated her. Now, there is a break. Please go and grab yourself more tea and coffee, discuss what you've heard already, because then we're coming back for a half-an-hour panel discussion for questions for our 3 speakers. So, 4 speakers. We've got 4 speakers, 1 extra one. 4. Oh, thank you. Thank you. No, not at all. Not at all. Please go and grab a tea, coffee, eat the person's breakfast beside you, and finish off the fruit. No one leaves before all the fruit is gone from the table. We'll be back in 15 minutes. Now, I've just been reminded, as I saw one of these fabulous bags on the floor, A, don't trip on it. Danger. I mean, that would be a nasty look, Jacqui, if someone tripped on a WorkSafe ACT bag.
It wouldn't be the first time.
It wouldn't be the first time. So please, the fabulous merch. So before the morning is over, fill your pockets, not with cutlery, glassware, just the fabulous merch. And interestingly, the last breakfast was for education, and it was lip salve. Today I noticed very direct, targeted merch. So thank you, WorkSafe. Now, on to our panel discussion. And we've got some questions already submitted, but please, if you have a question throughout this discussion, raise your hand. I think we have a roving microphone that'll go around, and so you can fire away. And as I think we've heard from the panellists or the speakers, open to uncomfortable discussions and uncomfortable questions as well, because we have to address this problem head on. Now, again, Jacqui Agius, the Work Health and Safety Commissioner here in the ACT, the Labour Hire Licence Commissioner, Joanne Farrell, that's 2 syllables if anyone was wondering. Thank you, Jo. From Build Like a Girl, Kane Group, and Australian of the Year 2024 ACT. And our distinguished professor from RMIT, Helen Lingard. And also joining us, Matt Davis, who's the Senior Director here at WorkSafe ACT of Compliance and Enforcement. So thanks, Matt, for joining us. Now, I'm going to kick off with one of the first questions that was submitted, and I think, Jacqui, this is for you to start. A couple of questions regarding safe work method statements, so SWIMs. The first one is, why was the term written swim added to the legislation?
Thanks for the question.
Yeah. Can you explain what that question is?
Yeah, I will. So thanks for the question. What I firstly need to explain is the difference between WorkSafe ACT and Work Safety Group. So Work Safety Group is an arm of the ACT government, and they write the legislation, and we're consulted in the same way that you're consulted over legislation. So the power to change legislation is part of the consultation process, but the decision is made at a government level. And WorkSafe ACT is an independent statutory authority in the ACT, a little bit different to New South Wales. And so we're totally independent, and we don't draft the legislation. In relation to the SWIMs, though, my trusty advisor, Matt, tells me that the requirement to have them site-specific is still there in the Code of Practice. But I'll hand... Matt might have a little bit more to say on that.
Morning, everybody. I hope breakfast was great. So look, I double-checked, obviously, when we got the question. There's actually been no change. I couldn't find a change in any of our legislation or documents. So everything is as it was. The code hasn't changed since, I think it was 2018, yeah. So written is still in the Code of Practice, and then it talks about site-specific in the way it always has, in that the SWIMs must be applicable to the site where the SWIMs are being used. So I'm not sure who asked the question, but we're happy to chat after the Q&A and go through specific concerns if you've got them.
And Jacqui, one more while we've got you on this, the safe work method statement is, what is the complaint mechanism for fraudulent workers' compensation claims by employees in the ACT?
So it's through the workers' comp insurer, but you can also let us know at WorkSafe ACT, and we do make inquiries about those issues. But the mechanism to investigate sits with the insurance company.
Okay. Now, if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring the microphone around to you. Minister Mick Gentleman down the front here. Thank you, Minister.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity. And my question's to Professor Helen. We had a chat a little while ago about your presentation and the length of hours of people working on work sites, and we were trying to understand why you would work so long. So what's the incentive, and then what is the opportunity to make change for those long hours?
Yeah, so obviously there are two different groups of workers in the construction industry. There are people who earn a wage and people who earn a salary. And our research has shown, obviously, people who earn a salary, which is a fixed amount of money irrespective of how many hours they work, have no incentive to work longer hours. And it's not surprising to know that almost entirely all of those workers would prefer to work fewer hours than they do. Waged workers, on the other hand, get paid a wage according to the amount of hours they actually work each week. And there are other issues around overtime and other, I guess, inducements to work longer hours because it's financially beneficial to do so. What we do know, though, is working more than 55 hours a week, according to the World Health Organization and the International Labour Organization globally, is actually the most prevalent cause of work-related death in terms of stroke and heart problems. So we know that working 55 hours a week is irrefutably a bad thing to do. And I think what we need to do is to think about, to what extent the incentives that are built in to the construction industry to work longer hours than 55 are in fact detrimental to people's health to such a degree that those things need to be reconsidered. It is really difficult. I am part of a piece of work that's being undertaken with the New South Wales Government and the Victorian Government and the Australian Constructors Association called the Culture in Construction Initiative. And as part of that initiative, a draft culture standard has been written that actually requires construction projects to work a 5-day week, or 5 in 7 if it's a site that runs 7 days a week, a maximum of 5 days in 7, and it caps hours at 50 hours a week or 55 if absolutely necessary. That's being trialled on 5 construction projects, and they've been going now for, a couple of years. They've just come to the conclusion. 3 of the projects have come to the conclusion. We've been interviewing people and surveying them on those projects throughout the duration of the projects. And the evidence thus far shows that the workers, the majority of workers, including the wage workers, are actually happy with those working time arrangements and indicate that they would prefer that over the 6-day week arrangements they were working to previously. Now, the work is still ongoing. The final report isn't going to be finished until the end of this year, but there is an interim report out that actually reports on the data collected thus far, and it's looking quite positive. So there are ways to do it. It does require obviously lots of conversations and consideration around the waged leisure time trade-offs that people experience, but it isn't an insurmountable thing to do.
And I wonder from that, Helen, the pressure on the construction industry, the workers, the labour shortage and the need to deliver projects here in the ACT alone. Like, you can see so many work sites, so many places that just haven't got the workers on them to finish the project. Is that a big part of the pressure for the company, the organisation, the small business to just keep working to get that job done so they can move on to the next one to just make a break?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the challenges we're looking at is how to attract more workers to the industry. And the data that we've got shows that these really long working hours are really, really unattractive to young workers who might be considering entering the industry, but also it's really difficult for people to work those hours in the context of modern families, because those hours are predicated often on having a breadwinner and a homemaker and a division of labour within households, which doesn't reflect the way modern families work. And so we hear men saying they want to spend more time with their families. We hear women saying they'd like to work in the industry, but the rigid, long, inflexible hours make it difficult for them to do so. And really, I think, you know, part of addressing this issue is actually looking at establishing working time arrangements that actually work for modern families.
Any more questions from the floor? Please raise your hand if you'd like to. I've got a question just on culture. You mentioned, Helen, culture, and I want to go back to Joe. You highlighted culture in the industry as sometimes an inhibitor to getting women in the industry, employees in the industry, sticking with it. What do you think needs to change? Like you made us uncomfortable. We were shifting in our seats. Please, can you continue that?
How much time have we got?
Yeah.
What needs to change?
Yeah. What's the big, like, if you had a list of 3 things? That
So the culture piece, everybody says, it's really hard to change culture. The problem's too big. It's too entrenched. You can't change that sort of stuff. Bullshit. Culture is the little behaviours and the little habits that are there daily, and every single person on a site, every person in this room, no matter who you work for and what you do in the industry, can change that. I often sort of try and point out to people that my story, my journey and my career has been defined by some fabulous men who have helped me along my way. And so what I like to point out is that, I hate that hashtag not all men, but that's the truth of the matter. You're not all bad, but you're not all good either. You're really bloody quiet, to be honest. So if you want to change culture, don't expect me to do it. Number one, it's not my problem. Like, the problem that we have with women and diverse people in construction is not our problem to bear, right? We shouldn't have to fight our way in, and we shouldn't have to keep proving that we belong. It's your problem. So the other part of it is that the people who make the environment in construction unsafe and unwelcoming with these types of really toxic behaviours are kind of the minority. About 20 or 25%, I would say, and that's just a general figure. The issue that we have with changing culture is the other 75 to 80% of us are the bystanders who just stand there and accept this stuff day in, day out. So as an example, I'll just give you a really quick example. After a keynote speech I gave last year for International Women's Day with 600 people in the room, a young lady came up to me, and she was a site engineer on a really large infrastructure site. And she said, wow, that really resonated with me. This thing happened to me at work. And she was doing an inspection of a trench, a stormwater trench on this job. Sounds delightful. And she was standing there, and the very much older project manager came up, and while they were doing this, put his arm around her and pulled her in close. And, there was a whole bunch of people standing there while they were doing this. And he was very touchy-feely with that, and not a single person said anything at that time. This is in a professional environment looking at a stormwater trench. I can't even fathom the need for that man to even touch her in that environment. And afterwards, several people came up to her and said, wow, that was really creepy and really uncomfortable. Are you okay? Why did you say it to her after? Where were you when she needed you to speak up at that moment and say to this gentleman, what are you doing? Stop in those moments and think, I have a voice and I have my power right here, right now, to nip this straight in the bud and say that's not appropriate. It's this little moment, right? This little moment in time, but there are thousands and thousands of these every day across our construction sites in Canberra, and you miss them. And men in the room, please embrace your power and your privilege that you have and start speaking up, because we're dying out here, right? We need you. We need you to stand by our side and to speak up. And in those moments, those little moments that you think maybe aren't a big deal, or maybe that wasn't so bad, or maybe that joke was a little bit off colour, but it's still funny. No. We need you to stand up. If you want to change the culture, if you want to stop talking about it and actually do something about it, be there in those moments for us, and that's how you change it. It's not that big a problem. Just stand up.
That takes a shitload of guts though, Joe. I think... it does take shitloads of guts, like it does, to stand up. And I think that while you say 75% of people stay quiet, and the quiet is a big part of the problem, it speaks to that culture around the humour and the shame and wanting just to remain with a job, not to become the point of the teasing, the bullying, whatever it is.
Wouldn't you rather be the person that stands up and says something knowing it's the right thing to do, rather than the person that stands there all the time being really uncomfortable knowing it's wrong and not doing anything? That's your choice.
Yeah. And I think often we think of workplace health and safety as physical, and then the emotional toll, as you've said. And this is just not just a chick thing, a woman thing, a chick thing. And I wonder how that humour that you spoke of, and I think you've been talking about this as well, Helen, how humour on the construction site plays into all of this. Because there's a unique sense of humour, no doubt about it, on the construction site. Have you done research into that, Helen?
We have actually, and interestingly enough, you're right. Humour is prevalent across all construction sites, and humour in the workplace is a good thing. If it's affiliative humour, it can build social cohesion. It can relieve tension. It can relieve boredom. It can do all sorts of good things. But when it crosses a line, it can be harmful and damaging to mental health and well-being. And often, when we've interviewed young women in the construction industry, one 18-year-old apprentice comes to mind, and documented in a report that we've written about apprenticeships and how apprentices experience health and safety. This young woman said, she was 18, "Oh, they call me a stupid bitch. They call me the C word." And then she said, "But it's nothing discriminatory or anything. It's so normalised. This is so normalised." And there's this acceptance that you have to have a thick skin to work in the industry. But in no workplace that should be tolerated or accepted, and you shouldn't need a thick skin to work in the construction industry, and people shouldn't be exposed to that. But that is passed off as humour, and there's actually an element, in my opinion, of moral disengagement with that, where people laugh it off and say you can't take a joke. If you call it out, you can't take a joke. But the fact is that stuff is not a joke. It's offensive and inappropriate and harmful, and yet it's very prevalent.
I want to talk now about the theme of this morning, Jacqui, was it pays to be safe at work. And I think you move on to then the legislation around safety and how fines mitigate or incentivise in some way safety. How far does that work?
So when you set fines, you're setting them for a broad range of businesses. So we've got everyone from a sole trader right up to a tier 1 construction company. And so the fines are the same for everyone. And you can't make them so inexpensive that a sole trader, for instance, wouldn't be able to afford them. Generally, they sit at around $3,800, but when it comes to the new silica infringements, they're more like $6,000, and some of you in this room have probably copped some of those, particularly in relation to the mandatory silica training, because we've issued lots of fines for people not being trained. We did have some success, or we have had some success with our repeat offender program. So we ran a program in the construction industry that we called the repeat offender program, and it was for construction companies who had the most notices in 2022, and it could have been 23. No, it was 22. And the top company sat at over 80. I think it was 83 notices for that financial year, which I can see some of you in the room will be shaking your head in shock horror. And then there were 20 companies, and the lowest one sat at 17 notices for that year. And what we did is we wrote to them all and said, we've identified you now as a repeat offender. If we come to your site and we see breaches, we won't be issuing infringements or notices. We'll be looking at prosecuting, and we were looking at risk-based prosecutions. And that program has resulted in some significant improvements for those top 20 businesses. So there are other ways other than infringements. The difference between an on-the-spot infringement and if you're prosecuted is quite significant. So if we issue an infringement for failure to follow SWIMS, for instance, you're looking at a $3,800 fine. If we take that to the magistrate's court, then you're looking at a maximum of $60,000 fine. So there are some significant differences, and we are now looking at how we can prosecute those repeat offenders so that we're using our tools in a powerful way.
I'm just going to put it out there to the room again. Any questions? If anyone's got any questions, down the back there. Oh, sorry, we'll come to you. Yep. Sorry, we'll go over here and then we'll come to you.
Hi, I'm Natasha from Nika. Again, I just have a couple of questions. I had a meeting with WorkSafe not that long ago, and they mentioned that you were talking to students that were currently, whether it was a school-based apprentice, and you were discussing their induction processes in regards to their companies, they're inducting them into their safe work method statements, that type of thing. They may mention that you might be heading down and doing that with the electrical industry. Is that still a view that you're, or with all of the apprentices, I guess, is engaging and looking into their induction and your whole process into, yeah?
So we do have a young worker program, and the young worker program is targeted to all young workers and looking at all industries. And one of the things that we do is we go out and speak to apprentices at some of the RTOs and at Canberra's equivalent to TAFE, which is CIT, and we've been into schools as well, so it is a big push for us. We consider young workers as vulnerable workers for lots of reasons, but we will continue that young worker program.
I think down the back here.
Barry Skinner. I own a company that does data cabling in commercial construction, and my question is around the whole health monitoring for silica, also the air monitoring as well. And I could literally have like an hour worth of questions. How many questions can I ask before we go?
Fire up. Put your feet
Sorry?
up, guys. Yeah.
Right.
Fire up, Barry.
So I've got one here for Helen to start off with. You're mentioning about doing things different in design, right? So when you look at this is put out by the ACT government, Work Health and Safety Managing the Risk of Airborne Silica Dust in the Workplace Code of Practice, only came out this month, 2024. It says there that everybody's got a duty of care when it comes to silica, and it starts from design, and it goes right down to the worker. PCBUs can have obligations up or down. You can have multiple PCBUs or people in control of the job. It talks about consultation when it comes to safe work method statements and things. So that being the case, it says if you've got somebody who controls a workspace and you've got multiple people working that workspace, you're supposed to consult with all those people about how you're going to do your tasks and your control measures. So if I look at my trade, where I've got to drill holes in a concrete slab and we put threaded rod, so I do that, electricians do that, plumbers do that, aircon people do that, pipes, most people do that. So does that mean that the builder should be getting everybody's control measures, picking the best and making everybody does the same thing? Because when you look at this document here, you go to the back of the document in Appendix C, there's a risk assessment. And it first talks about elimination, and then it talks about different control measures. So when you break it down,
Yep, all good.
you got it? Yeah, so when you break it down, like talks about using water and things like that. So if you're drilling a hole, you're not going to be able to use water. So when you break it down, answer all the questions, it comes down to onboard tool extraction and PPE. So if that's going to be the control measure for drilling holes above head, why wouldn't you just make it say everybody does the same thing? Because the next section it talked about is air monitoring. And when it talked about air monitoring, it says you've got to do it every 12 months. I just got a quote for air monitoring, it's $5,500, right? So can industry associations get together and say, right, when you do this control measure, this works, so everybody can use that model, and they pay for the training or they pay for the report, and then members can pay a small fee to use that report rather than each individual trade having to do the same thing for the same task. That's my first question.
Yeah, we'll put that to the... Who wants to take that one on? I think another uncomfortable moment.
So
We'll
I guess I'll
go
say
to
straight
Matt,
up.
who's compliance and reinforcement.
So that's a great question, and it's not the first time that we've heard the discussion around, is there the possibility of having, I guess, a common risk assessment and people contributing to that? I guess the risk there is that things change on your sites all the time, and that's why it really does come back. And we had an earlier question about controls being site specific, and that links into that. So whilst it is, sometimes it does seem really simple, I think that the environmental factors can actually make it more complicated. We would be happy to talk to you about that very in-depth question offline, because I did a fair bit of reading last night around your questions, and it's complex. There's lots of different PCBUs involved. You're all there at different times. It takes a little bit of work between the different PCBUs, but you'll get a great outcome if everyone consults with each other. So, Brooke, who's my construction manager, is just behind you. We'd be happy to chat with you after this.
No worries. And flying on from that...
Yep. We'll keep it short there, Barry. We'll just sort of, can we yeah,
right up. Well,
fire it up.
Yeah, one question at a time.
Yeah, if you follow on from that, right, if you look at the whole document here, it says everybody's got a duty of care from design. Yep. So if that being the case, you could eliminate all that drilling in concrete that way. If the buildings were designed, if the government, particularly on government jobs, you've got high-paid consultants who can work out fixing mechanisms that can be put in the slab that go in a grid reference type thing, so everybody can just hook into those and eliminate all drilling altogether, and you would eliminate that silica risk when it comes to that job. So why can't the government push that in design?
I'm not going to speak on behalf of the government, but look, we have seen that, and I don't know if that particular PCB is in the room, but I know that as people's safety systems evolve, I've seen at least one company that is actually grid referencing their fixing points and putting them in the slab. So I think that as we move forward, and it's our responsibility as a group to push it, you'll see more of that elimination, where the designers are actually thinking about what happens to the workers who are using the end product.
We have actually got the Minister for Sustainable Building and Construction here, Minister Vassarotti. Would you like to respond to that, Minister? We'll get a microphone to...
Thanks very much. Look, we've been doing a lot of work in terms of, particularly through the National Construction Code, about really looking at what those minimum standards are and actually getting consistency in a whole range of areas. You know, we've been particularly focused on issues such as energy efficiency and accessibility over the last period of time with NC 2022. But I think sort of actually having a look at standards that look particularly at safety is a really good thing. We are really dependent on the construction board in terms of doing some of the technical work around that, and that's, you know, in terms of how we really pick up some of those issues to eliminate safety is a really important element. The other thing that we are looking at a local level is particularly looking at our certification process, and again, this has been really looking at picking up issues of defects and really trying to identify issues as early in the process as possible. So we are particularly looking at that issue of design and documentation, and so I think it's a really fair comment, and I think it's it's an area that we can work particularly with WorkSafe and other areas in terms of ensuring that our minimum standards are picking up, issues to eliminate safety concerns as well.
Is it Barry? Yeah, Barry, you might just need to set up a chair and capture all these folk on the way out. Is that? I know you've probably got heaps more questions. Any more questions? Because we're actually reached time. But any more questions? Just I think we'll. We've got to go to work, Barry.
I'll be quick, Barry. Sorry, Christy Burt from Master Builders ACT. I just wanted to first of all thank the panel for their input today. Psychosocial is big at the moment. Just wanting to know from a WorkSafe perspective, are you seeing any trends in the responses that you're getting from industry? How are things going at the moment?
Yeah, so the psychosocial team, so the way we set up our programs is we try and embed the psychosocial component into all the different industries. I'll be completely honest, we haven't evaluated that program yet, but I'm sure that when we do, we'll work with our internal strategy team, and if we do see trends, we would be more than happy to share that. And
just quickly, Matt, just to highlight what psychosocial is, because when I started with this industry breakfast series, I didn't know what a psychosocial hazard was. So can you just quickly outline it so everybody is aware of what they're looking at, what they're looking for?
Yep. So the easiest way, and this is how I do it all the time, is psychosocial hazards are those that are going to affect our health and well-being. There's a range of things that will present will lead to a psychosocial hazard, a psychosocial risk. Things like OV, job design, role overload, role clarity. My advice is we have a great poster that's sitting out. Hopefully it is out there. We have a great poster out on our... Oh, I've got a thumbs up from Georgia. That's excellent. Grab that and put it up at your workplace because it's really easy to follow and it demystifies that whole psychosocial question. It's really good. So.
Well, I think that has to wrap up our morning. Is that... Oh, Jacqui, you still want...
Yeah, I just psychosocial. It's my, it's really something that we're focusing on at WorkSafe ACT. And I had shared that years ago I received a psychological injury because of a workplace incident, and I guess. One of the issues is people think that construction is just physical, and it's not. We must absolutely, in the construction industry, start looking at our what are causing psychosocial hazards, and one of the, Joe's already spoken about those, particularly for women in the industry. We know that more women than men make claims for psychological injuries, and it's because we're not managing those psychosocial hazards. But just a really quick little story. Imagine a young apprentice construction worker who is climbing up a scaffold day in, day out, and the scaffold is shonky. It's got missing planks, it's got missing toe boards, it hasn't got your guardrails or your mid-rails, and they're using that every day, but they're too scared to come to their employer and say, I'm too scared to get up that scaffold every time. I have this intense fear every morning when I have to climb up that scaffold. The risk of that apprentice being diagnosed with a psychological injury because, and it's a compound injury because of that repeated exposure to a psychosocial hazard is real. And so we need to start thinking really broadly in the construction industry about psychosocial hazards. My hope is one day we will treat psychosocial hazards and view them in the same way that we view physical hazards, and we need to get to that, and we've got a way to go before we do.
Jacqui, I think that's a great way to wrap up. And before we do, can I just get one statement from each of you as we head off to work today, on site, in the office, wherever? What do you want people just to think about?
For me, I think very, very, very interested in what Jo said, and I think there is a real issue around changing the culture of the industry, and that goes to dealing with some of the psychosocial risk issues as well that Jacqui just mentioned.
I'd like you all just to look after your workers and recognise that they are the core of your business, and if you treat them really well and keep them safe, your businesses will thrive.
I just try and turn up to work every day and remind myself that we're all just people and we're doing our best, and some days we get it right and some days we don't, myself included. But with the unrealistic timeframes of programs and the pushing and all of the commercial impacts that we're having, people will make unsafe decisions if they're under pressure, but also if they're just not feeling good. And so I think the best thing we can do is try and turn up, and yes, it's a job, yes, there's lots of pressures, there's a lot going on, but at the end of the day, they're people and the most important part of it, and we just all need to be a little bit better, I think, every day.
Thank you all for joining us this morning. Can you please give a big round of applause for our fabulous panellists, Joanne Farrell, Matt Davis, Jacqui Agius and Helen Lingard. And thank you all for coming out this morning. Please take all the merch, grab the posters as you leave, and pass on the word. Follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook. There it is, the social media. Thank you all again.